me and Mike here, and we narrowed this down to the top 20, and we're going to go through them.
I watched 228 videos.
We got together and we played them as a group, a bunch of judges. It was myself, Mike Mullins, Ben Begeal, Jay Treat, and Nat Levan. It was the 5 of us.
So after we compiled all the different responses from the judges and my responses after going through all those, your thoughts, we basically used some crazy math and or picked our favorites together and ended up with 20. So these are the 20 that we like, that we all kind of as a group thought we should definitely play.
Yeah.
So these are the 20 that we printed and cut, and we're going to get together to play.
So I will start with 1, 2, 3 paddle.
Cool.
1, 2, 3 paddle was really neat because I'd first seen some images of it on Twitter and all, and it reminded me of Avignon. So our game Avignon uses a little map on the side, and it's a 2-player push and pull Pope game where you're pushing and pulling them between each other. But the thing about 1, 2, 3 paddle was it made this shoreline with the cards. So it reminded me of the map of Avignon, in that you're using cards to create this shoreline, and then you're working your way down the shoreline in a canoe. And you're pushing to the left, you're pushing to the right, and it just had this. I guess it's a grid-based play, which is like Avignon, but it doesn't feel like a grid-based play.
Oh, yeah. So the thing that I thought was really cool is that you have to make sure you play the right amount of lefts and rights, because if you paddle the left too many times and you start going all sideways and stuff,
yeah.
Which I just thought was really neat. Like a simple card that has a right and a left on it gets used in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah,
so
that is
worth
cool.
a shot. A Delicate Truth. So that's the one that I was going to talk about. A Delicate Truth is a social deduction game where it's very simple. You're either CIA or KGB. One side has one flag, the other side has the other. And you start off by just choosing which one you're going to be. But then all those cards get stacked into a deck that represents the player's holding them. It's called the ID deck. And each turn you have to do 2 things. One is you play a mission to the center from your hand. So I could play a KGB mission or a CIA mission. And then I take the deck of IDs under the table, and I can pretend to do something. I could flip the top card, or I could flip the whole deck. And then I hand the deck to you. So you can see the new top card, but that's all you can see. And so it's this really cool kind of deduction thing, really slick, simple mechanics. And it was definitely worth a play to see, is there enough information there? Does it get a little bit too chaotic? Is it like a cool bluffing thing? So that was a Delicate Truth, and it seemed like it would be a lot of opportunity for sort of fun bluffing stuff.
Alpha Cross is a word game where you sit across from it's 2 players. You sit across from your opponent, and you're playing cards to this grid that is also represented on the cards. So the cards show letters. I believe it's 25 of the 26 letters. Might be missing Q.
Yeah, it's a 5x5, no Q.
Okay, so it's 5x5 grid. When you play into this grid, the letter, the spot that you play in is the letter that you play, and you're forming these words. Over the course of the game, you're trying to, it's like connect 4, but you're connecting 5 in a line across by using your cards in all those spaces and making words, which is a really different approach to wordplay. And we play games like, if you look at like Scrabble is a grid-based wordplay as well. And then a lot of other games don't use anything like that. It's just coming up with words and coming up with whatever. So it's really neat to see this tactile word game with just a single card.
Any word you choose, the letter has to go in that position.
Yeah.
And so then you have to try to take over that position by saying words that your opponent can control the letters from. So it's a really neat idea. We were all worried it was too smart for us.
Yeah, it is just talking about it.
Desert Pack was the next one I had, which is a really, really neat game where it's a 2-player game, and you have a few types of coyotes in your deck. You have a howling coyote that's worth 2 stars, a normal coyote who's just alert, and then a tired coyote. And so basically it's sort of a bluffing, attacking, defending game where I declare how many coyotes I'm going to attack with. You can then defend with that many or less if you choose, although you pretty much wouldn't ever choose less. Some of them you can rest, and then you can upgrade the stars. So tired becomes alert, alert becomes howling for more points. And then anything that you defend with stops me from scoring points. So whoever's involved in the fracas gets downgraded, and then any any excess points I have, any of my attack that gets through, basically, I score points for. So it's just managing your upgrade deck. You don't want to get too tired. And the thing that was really neat is that the only cards that are accessible to you are off the top of the deck. Now, you can look, but if, like, say my first 3 coyotes are tired, and I want to decide to attack, I could bluff and say that I'm going to attack. But if I attack with those, there's no getting more tired. They're gone from the game.
Yeah.
So my deck starts getting thinner. My options get sort of depleted. So it just seemed like a really cool and clean. Again, the cards very simple, and that's part of the allure. Is that, you know, I know what you have, you know what I have, but how are you going to manage that? Are you going to let attacks through? Are you going to flirt with letting me score a bunch while you upgrade your cards? It just seemed like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and it just from the start, we were seeing a lot of submissions come in, and then that one came, and it was still fairly early on. I know it wasn't like the last day. It was definitely before that. And as I was watching them, you see a lot of things that are similar. And then I saw that one, and I was like, wow, that's different than everything else so far. And it really stood out.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that was in my first, like, you were sending me entries in batches of 25 or so. And that was my first batch of 25. And I had that in my 20 finalists since that first batch. So Drakard is sort of an interesting take on tile layers because it's not exactly tiles. They're sort of randomized ships in an ocean. So one side has 6 ships on it, 3 orange, 3 red. And then the other side has this big giant serpent on it.
Yep.
Okay. So when you first start, you decide how many of those giant serpents and how many Armada cards you want. You make up your own deck, and you put them in the order you want. You're going to get those cards in that exact order. And then once per game, you can decide before you assign something, you flip it. And so you're playing them onto the field, but the kicker is you can only cover a certain number of opponent ships. And so if I'm playing a card that has 3 of my ships on it, I'm only allowed to cover 3 of yours. So it's this very clever arrangement thing where it's not so much about like scoring adjacency points or things like that. You're just literally trying to arrange ships in a way that you won't then be able to cover them. Like if I jam a bunch of mine together, normally you would think that's bad. But since you can only cover a limited number with each card, getting them together is kind of a good thing. And then protecting it with the giant serpent cards that don't have many ships but do block. So it just seemed like a really neat, and it's not a standard tile layer, even though you're putting cards on the field. It just felt a lot different.
Drive Like Hell comes in, and it was one of those ones where as soon as I started sending to people, like I was getting messages back like, what is this? Oh my God, you know. I was seeing it not just on the judge side, but also on, you know, Discord and Facebook and everything. And it was like, this was, somebody took it to a level that nobody else did. And it was, it's basically, it's a racing game where it's solo. You're racing your car around this track and you're avoiding the devil. And
yeah, trying to escape hell.
Trying to escape hell before the devil catches up to you. And what's really neat about it is the cards are just multi-use in like 100 different ways. And super clever graphic design ways in where like the cards together say Drive Like Hell. So it makes this really cool, like unique map. And it doesn't look like a board game in any way. It looks like a poster for a film or something. And that's what's pretty cool about it. But the eye in Drive makes a car and it lines up with, you know, going around the track. There's these little arrows that point and you can use them for tracking resources and things like that. And then when you play the game, you're flipping the cards and they're either going to say Drive or Hell because of the way Drive Like Hell connects together. So it's a really clever batch of things on one card that together make this really cool little map and racing game. So, Exit Pursued by a Bear. The thing about this game is it's probably the prime example of making a pitch to catch somebody's eye. The designer of this is really good at pitching, and pitching is a different thing than maybe submitting a video for a contest, but it's a great tool to have as a designer. But watching this video, it was just like, I'm sold immediately. And, you know, the whole thing about it is it was a Shakespearean line, and Mike knows more about this than I do. Because I'd never heard of it before this.
Stage directions. It's one of the most famous stage directions of all time. So just the title Exit Pursued by a Bear was a stage direction. And to this day, it's debated whether or not that was supposed to be like tragic, like, oh no, he dies eaten by a bear, or like chased off by a bear. Like, is it comedy or tragedy? And that's sort of the premise of the cards, is that one player is the comedy player and one player flips it and they want to be the tragedy player. So you're trying to do board control, but with those, those classic tragedy comedy masks.
Yeah, they looked really nice too.
So it's very Othello-y, where you're trying to control the board, with just some neat potential chain reactions, which I think caught a lot of the judges' eyes of like, okay, but if that flips, now that's bear, so that flips in this direction too. So definitely worth trying out. First Love. Okay, so this is an example of the try to do everything on one card answer or solution to this puzzle. Okay. So the idea with First Love is that you were trying to get these couples back together. Okay, so they start on opposite sides of the board. So your cards represent the abilities that you can choose to do in a turn, the board itself, the people. So it is a cooperative game of simultaneous action selection. So you might be going up and I might be going down, and we can't really tell each other where we're going to go. So the whole idea is, can we sort of hide and choose our actions and then reveal that, okay, I went up and left, and then you spent an energy to do this. So it's kind of a neat premise. Again, another game that there's not a lot like it. Just the whole idea of like, okay, we play two people on these 4 cards far apart, and we have to kind of walk around trees and rocks and bridges and find each other. Just one of those that we had to try.
Fox Meadow, which is its cards are split into 2. There's digits. I believe it's 3 through 6 or something like that. And those are the amount of money a card is, and how much you can spend and how much the card costs. And then each card has a simple icon, which is like flip, rotate. So you're manipulating the cards, making them better than they were, more valuable. And you're trying to, what is the end goal? It's just get 3 of the same?
There's 3 fields of play. Yeah, there's wild, and then you have your den, which are not accessible to the other player. That's kind of like your deck, but they all come out in a row. Then you have your meadow. You need 3 identical foxes in your meadow.
Exactly.
So you're trying to get them to come out of the deck in a certain order. You're trying to manipulate cards so they come out of your den in a certain order. And I'm trying to screw with your cards so you don't win before I do.
Yeah, and it's neat. And I don't want to tell Chris, but it's one of those games that could also be like an in-hand game.
I don't want to tell Chris. Do you know how videos work?
HOPLITE came in and ended up on the top of everyone's list. And the video showed the little hook of it, which is how you twist cards around other cards. In a way, I played games where you take a card and pivot and spin them around on an axis and all, and it doesn't. It goes around the card and twists and gets into a new position in a really cool and interesting way. And the video showed it sped up, and I don't know if it was for effect or for time to get it into a 3-minute video, but watching them just manipulate the cards around was just, it's awesome.
It was mesmerizing.
Yeah, it really was. So it's this cool little basket weaving. It's a 2-player head-to-head, and when I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, these aren't going to line up. Like, there's no way it's going to line up, and it does in this crazy, crazy way. How
do you make 2 armies fight feel different and cool?
Yep, exactly.
And that's what HOPLITE does. It's 2 armies fight, ho-hum. But then, like, the first time in the video that he, like, split off one group from another group, I was like, you can do that? Like, it just seems so cool.
Yeah, it's like, you always want to rule that, like, you can't have gaps, but you can have gaps. Hoofons, which is, all right, they're little, and I remember the designer was on Discord trying to come up, he's like, these are either buffalo or cows, and he was trying to figure out what they were called at the time, and then I saw Hoofons came in, and I was like, oh, that's the buffalo cow game. The whole thing is, it's like a masterpiece in a single card, and like, I say that because you've got this cute little cow buffalo thing on one side, which is almost irrelevant to anything else. It could be a token, it could be anything else. The back side of the card is just the actions, and the actions that you can do on your turn surround the back side of the card, and you place cards on these piles just adjacent to the locations on that card.
So you have a single card in the center of the table.
And then it just shows you where to place cards around it. And when you place the cards around it, you're placing them in piles, and the quantity of cards in that pile, the amount of cards in each pile are what determine how many cards you draw, how many cards you play, how much things are worth, what the scoring conditions are at the end of the game. And it's an amazing use of card count, which early on people were looking for design space in 18 identical cards, and I was like, card count is one of them. You know, I don't know a lot of people that are using card count, but the number of cards
really underutilized.
Exactly. Yeah. That's like a really good spot of design space. And this one used that in like 7 ways in one game, which is really cool.
Yeah. Interceptor was another one that was, if it wasn't in my first batch of 25, it was in my second. So this was another one that was on the top 20 from the very beginning of my judging, because it does so many things right. Okay, so Interceptor, it is a card with a common back, which, first of all, I don't know, 20 entries had a common back.
Not many.
Every one of them tried to use every inch of that card, right? So the fact that this entry had a common back, I was like, all right, what are you doing to me here? What's on the other side?
Yeah, they're like, we can cut this in half.
Yeah. The other side is secret messages and bribe money. Yeah, bribe money. And basically what happens is before the game starts, you establish a secret code with your partner. So, okay, every time I like do anything and touch my head in any way, that's going to be a secret code. And if I touch my shorts, that's going to be bribe money. So if I'm just standing here at the table like this, that's bribe money, okay? And so now we're going to go 1, 2, 3 and play our cards. And Jason and I are going to try to match. It's like, yes, I touched my shorts. We both played bribe money. The thing is, the other 2 people, it's a 4-player game, 2 teams of 2, they're going to be staring at us and trying to catch our codes every time. So the way the scoring sort of works is that if we match and we fool them, then they lose a card.
Yep.
If they match us, we lose a card. If we fail to match, we have to give them one of our cards. So it's like, at any point in time, if you can guess even one of the other team's signals, the game ends immediately with a victory. So it's like, it's this intentional cheating encouraged thing. It just looked so awesome. I mean, a perfect identical card game, because the cards are just a vehicle to do this fun, crazy thing of just being like.
Speaking of fun to watch, the thing about it was this big is it is so simple. I mean, there's wonderful graphic design on it that makes it more than the simplicity that it needs to be. And the whole idea is you take 2 cards and you're going to place them on a table some distance apart. And then what you're going to try to do is fit as many cards as you can within those cards without overlapping and without leaving a significant gap, and you're going to score points. So it's press your luck. You know you could probably squeeze 1 in here, but can I squeeze 2 in here? It starts to get a little hairy as you start, separating it more.
Yeah, not even squeeze in. You're trying to guess exactly
how many fit.
You're trying to space it exactly. Yeah,
exactly. So it's straight up visual spatial placement.
It's a game to gather around, and it's not even about the game, because you're all going to be kind of, shooting the breeze while you play and whatever. But it's something to do while you do that, and it's a cool little diversion.
Exactly.
Okay, so Knuckles, single card, the front says Knuck and the back says Coles. Like this great little 4-player heads up, like attempt to make somebody else, force them into a play. Just really neat. One of those things that very, very simple. Again, you can tell that a lot of the games that I sort of put high on my list really did adhere to the spirit of this whole identical card thing. So Knuckles, again, Knuck on the front, Coles on the back, and there's a whole lot of gameplay in there. So that's another one we just had to try.
All right, Lint and Fluff.
It's kind of like Mouse Guardy. So you play this little mouse who's got some abilities to attack spiders and other things. And when you kill the spiders, you are trying to collect lint to make your den comfortable back home. So it's this little adventure game, but basically it's a puzzle, because you lay out the board and you can see which enemies are facing which direction. And so you're rotating your mouse so that like your sword faces this way, and you do enough damage to attack this and collect the lint. So it's, a neat little theme and a cool, basically puzzle to work your way through. Certainly I was a sucker for it because it's solo, but it also, did a good job of here's the front, here's the back, here's your items, here's your enemies. Looked like a nice implementation of a bigger game in this small design space. So Octopus Escape Plan is one that almost got by us. I mean, I just finished talking about the fact there was lots of tile layers, and this is a tile layer. But what's different about this, and what made us sort of take notice, is that there's games where you build a path, and there's games where you surround areas and claim ownership. There's a lot of adjacency games, and this one sort of seemed at first glance kind of like one of those. You are making basically a net. Okay, you imagine like links in a net, right? And in the net, you're trying to catch sea creatures. Well, what's neat about it is that the first person to play a card with minnow side face up becomes the minnow player. It's a 3-player game. The other 2 immediately become anglers. So now they have separate goals, which was something that not a lot did. These games were very symmetric in their presentation. And then in this asymmetric game, one person is trying to make open chains. So they can dead end the net. So they kind of go into no man's land, and they're trying to make some things that are wide open. And the anglers are trying to make either small little loops to catch fish, or even a big connected thing, and they get points for all the fish inside. So another case where we look at it and we go, oh, path builder, but it surprised us with something new, and that's exactly what you got to do to catch judges' attention. So Pike, another entry in the 2 armies face each other in attack and capture, right? So according to the previous formula, it has to do something new for it to be interesting, right? And this absolutely does it. Normally, if you can deploy more stuff in an army game, you're going to win, right? But now your deployable pieces are also kind of your score pile. So if I capture your stuff and I want to flip it to my side and play it again, I'm now 1 card further away from victory.
But it was just 2 arrows. So it's one of those ones where, people ask if, art matters and, graphic design matters. And like, if it needs to, yes, it does. If it doesn't need to, these, it couldn't be more bare bones than this. And you could try to theme it and made these things or whatever, but it's seriously a white arrow on black and a black arrow on white. And it shows that can get through and make it into our finals. All right, so next up is SMASHMOUTH 1881. So it plays very much like a football game. One player plays offense, one player plays defense. What stood out to me the most about this, which is really funny and nobody can ever predict this in future contests, is that I decided I was going to do one game, and the game that I was working on was a football game where one side was the field and the other side was the players. I did it for like a night. I never shared anything because I didn't want to, throw my hat into the ring or whatever for the contest. But one came in, and it also just happened to be really neat implementation of it, because what I was looking at was very one note in that we were just one player on one player. This spread out the entire field and had these cool gaps that you would create and try to work your way through. And I'm also a sucker for football themed games. Like Battle Ball is, if I'm at a yard sale and they have a copy of Battle Ball, I buy it even though I've already got like 4 of them. So Space Scuffle did something that a lot of people didn't do, that gains bonus points. And it was like a 30-second video. And like, not only was that 30-second video, it got to everything that you needed to know in 30 seconds, which is awesome because we had a lot of videos to watch. So it was great to see something that came in brief and good, at the same time.
This was the only real space game that made it to the top 20 because it was so clean.
Yep.
It seemed there wasn't too much on the cards. It had the right angles for which direction you could pitch things. But it did just enough that it didn't seem to be too hazy.
Yeah.
Where I was like, can I do this? Am I allowed? What happens if we overlap? But it wasn't too much that it was like over-designed.
Yeah, that always seems to be the issue with them, is just the what happens. And the funny thing is, like, I don't know all the people that would play those kind of games, but those games are usually pretty heated, and like we're fighting, we're little maneuvers can be a problem, and it's funny that you can make games where little maneuvers will happen, but little maneuvers are a problem.
So Unicellular, I saw a fair number of simultaneous reveal action selection games. It's something that is, I don't want to say easy to do in a disparaging way, but when you have a small number of cards, a way to add a weight to a decision is to not know what your opponent's going to do, right? So you have a simultaneous reveal. And with Unicellular, all the cards are the same, and basically each card just has it has 6 spots on it, and those are the 6 things that can do depending on how many of your cards you activate. So it's very much a social gaming kind of, I think that you think kind of thing. But some of the games I like that, specifically this reminded me of Walk the Plank, where, okay, I'm going to shove you left with my first card, and then I'm going to retreat with my next card. This is very much that. Like, I'm going to pass cards left, and hopefully they don't pass me cards so I can shed my cards. It's ultimately a shedding game. And so it just seemed neat. It seemed like this one had some chops in the field of other simultaneous selection games that we saw.
That's our top 20.
Yeah, so congrats to everybody that made it in the top 20. There was just such a cool variety of games that we found. Some solo, some social, some really higher level spelling. So there's just some cool stuff in
there's social, there's spatial, it's cool. So what we didn't announce, and we should say it now, is if you are not on this list, it does not necessarily mean we won't be revisiting it in some way. We have some special awards.
Well, the best way you put it when we were talking about this was you called them the stars in Mario Party. Like the extra, like you hit the most green blocks or whatever, but in this time it's going to be like you did this in your video or your game had this, because there's some stuff that we just can't not talk about.
All right. I think that's it. I think we're good.